Have you ever trusted someone deeply only to one day realize they never deserved it? Have you ever felt that someone was being kind to you, yet for some reason you still felt uneasy and emotionally drained? And have you ever wondered why certain people come into your life only to slowly take away your peace without you even realizing it? We tend to believe that if someone smiles, acts friendly, or always shows up at the right moments, they must be trustworthy. But the truth, sometimes painful, is this: not everyone who smiles at you is safe. Some people wear loyalty like a role they've perfected, but behind the mask lies manipulation, envy, and a desire to control, and if you're not careful, you may end up handing them access to the most sacred part of you, your inner peace. But that won't happen again. In this video, we're going to expose 9 types of people who do not deserve your trust, even if they've been in your life for years. This isn't a lesson in becoming cold or harsh, it's a lesson in clarity. Stoic philosophy teaches us that you have control over your mind, not external events. And part of that control is learning to choose who truly deserves to stand beside you. If you're ready to protect your inner calm and keep only those who are worthy of a seat at your table, you're in the right place. Subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us on this journey. Because once you learn to recognize the signs, you'll never see your relationships the same way again. Let's begin. The first type of person you should never trust: the manipulator. This person doesn't always look like a villain. In fact, they're often the ones with the warmest smiles, the most thoughtful questions, the ones offering a shoulder when you need it most. But beneath that polished surface lies a calculating mind. Their kindness isn't a gift, it's a tool. A kind of currency they use to buy control over your emotions. Like a quiet puppeteer, they gently pull the strings. One moment they lift you with praise. The next, they subtly chip away at your confidence with cleverly disguised words. And over time, you begin to doubt yourself. You second-guess your feelings, your decisions. You even apologize for things you didn't do wrong. That's not love. That's not friendship. That's manipulation. I once witnessed a close colleague go through this. At first he thought he was lucky. She was supportive, constantly encouraging him, even surprising him with coffee and kind compliments. But months later, those same gestures became a silent cage. The support turned into surveillance. She began twisting the things he had once shared. In confidence, using his vulnerability to make him feel guilty, as if love was just another form of control wrapped in sweet disguise. And this is only the first face among 9 types of people you must learn to recognize. In the next part, we'll meet another type 1 that appears harmless on the surface, but quietly poses an even greater threat. Are you ready? Previously, we saw how a manipulator can wear a mask of care while silently infiltrating someone's mind. And the result, that person begins to shrink, not from the world, but within their own life. My colleague became timid and hesitant. Every action, every word was carefully measured just to avoid upsetting her. Even the smallest decisions had to be filtered through how she might react. That's how master manipulators work. They don't destroy you all at once. They wear you down little by little, day by day, quietly. Stoic philosophy reminds us we cannot control others, but we must control how we respond to them. And the first step toward control is awareness. You don't need a dramatic confrontation to expose manipulation. All you need is to notice the small things. Do you often feel the need to explain yourself? Do you leave conversations confused, guilty, or unsure of what just happened? Do you feel like you're living in constant emotional negotiation, always trying to manage someone else's reactions rather than living your truth? If the answer is yes, that's your intuition waving a red flag. Even if your mind hasn't caught up, your inner self has already sensed it. Manipulators thrive in the gray areas. They blur intentions, bend boundaries, and rewrite history to serve their version of the truth. They gossip under the guise of concern, whisper judgment under the excuse of honesty. But one day when you're not in the room, you'll be the one there, talking about in that same tone. Their tactics are familiar. Gaslighting, guilt-tripping, playing the victim, it's all designed to disorient you, to keep you compliant. A form of psychological warfare dressed as affection. But the Stoic does not retreat. They believe clarity is strength. As Marcus Aurelius once said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. So what do you do when you find yourself caught in the storm of manipulation? You'll become your own lighthouse. Set boundaries like stone. Don't share your vulnerable truths with those who've used them to hurt you. Speak clearly, act with intention, and when necessary, walk away. Not to punish them, but to protect yourself. This is not hatred. It's clarity, because your peace is not a gift to be handed to the unworthy. Trust is sacred, and it should only be built with those who want to see you grow, not shrink to fit inside their control. And you'll see the moment you stop being pulled by invisible strings, your presence becomes more powerful than ever before. So stay with me, because the second type of person you should be wary of is just as toxic, the perpetual critic. They don't manipulate. They break you down with words openly and relentlessly. Let's meet them next. In the previous section, we talked about manipulators, those who erode you from the inside out. But not everyone needs to control you through actions. Some people only need words. These are the perpetual critics. They're not the ones who yell or insult you outright. They're subtler, more refined, and in some ways more dangerous. Their words aren't meant to help or uplift you. They're more like tiny needles, quiet but sharp, piercing your confidence little by little over time. And the scariest part, if you're not careful, you begin to mistake their voice for the truth. You internalize their criticisms, and soon that voice becomes your own whispering in your ear every time you try to step outside your comfort zone. I remember working with an older colleague once. She was well respected, experienced, and held a strong position in the company. But something quickly became clear. She had a way of subtly undermining others under the guise of professionalism. Every time someone presented a new idea, she would raise an eyebrow, respond with doubt or sigh, "That's not how we did it in my day." At first, I thought she just had high standards. But over time, I realized it wasn't about standards. It was about insecurity masked as authority. Many critics don't tear others down because they want you to grow. They do it because they're afraid of being left behind, afraid of becoming irrelevant, afraid of a world that's evolving too fast for them to keep up. And beneath all of that is unhealed pain. People who carry emotional wounds often pass that pain on to others. They tear you down because they're quietly disappointed in themselves. But Stoic philosophy reminds us are not obligated to accept every opinion thrown at us. As Epictetus taught, it's not things that harm us, but our interpretation of them. In other words, it's not the critic's voice that hurts you. It's when you allow that voice to define your worth. And this is where boundaries become essential, not harsh confrontations, just quiet, firm lines that protect your peace. You can listen to criticism, but ask yourself, does this help me grow? Or is it simply draining me? The answer is the latter. Then it's time to reclaim the power you once gave that voice. You don't owe anyone the right to dim your inner light simply because they haven't found theirs. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be cold. It asks you to be anchored, steady, like a ship in a storm. And in the endless tide of criticism, your clarity, your purpose, your values, these are what will keep your soul intact. You can't change the direction of the wind, but you can adjust your sails. And sometimes that adjustment means steering away from the voices that only aim to pull you down. Now we arrive at the third type of person, someone who might seem harmless, maybe even entertaining at first, but in reality, they slowly leak away pieces of your trust. The gossip. Are you ready? Right. After the critic comes another type of person, quieter, but no less dangerous, the gossip. They don't hurt you with direct insults. They hurt you by turning the things you trusted them with into entertainment for others. On the surface, they seem friendly. They whisper with wide eyes and excited tones, making you feel like the two of you share something special, a private space that no one else is part of. But if you look closer, you'll see it. Every conversation with them is part of a larger pattern, a cycle of betrayal disguised as social connection. Gossip isn't just harmless chatter. It's a weapon wrapped in fake intimacy. And more often than not, the one bringing you stories about others is also taking your story elsewhere. I saw this unfold in a neighborhood I used to live in. There was a woman who was always at the center of every gathering, smiling, talking, always the first to say hello. If someone's kid got in trouble at school, she knew. If a couple was struggling, she whispered it across fences before the sun even rose. One afternoon, I made the mistake of confiding in her. Nothing major, just a personal difficulty I was going through. Within days, I started hearing fragments of my own story coming back to me from other people, twisted, exaggerated, and clearly passed around like party favors. I felt exposed. I felt ashamed. But above all, I felt foolish for trusting the wrong person. The truth is, people like that don't gossip because they're inherently cruel. They do it because of the insecurity buried deep inside them. They tell stories to feel powerful, if only for a moment. They fill the silence in their lives with other people's drama. And they do it all to avoid facing the emptiness within themselves. Gossip makes them feel important without ever having to open up or form a genuine connection. But Stoic philosophy gives us a compass. Epictetus once said, "Don't speak about others in a way you wouldn't speak to them directly." That's not just politeness, that's honor. And it's also a clear warning if you surround yourself with those who casually damage others' reputations, you're inviting that same energy into your own life. Gossip is never one way. It always loops back. So what's the solution? It doesn't require confrontation or conflict, just distance and discipline. When a conversation starts veering into someone else's personal life, redirect it. If that doesn't work, excuse yourself quietly and respectfully. Guard your own words, and most importantly, don't give your trust to those who treat secrets like currency. Your personal life, your struggles, your successes, deserves hands that will protect it, not mouths that will display it for attention. To live stoically is to protect your peace, not just by choosing what you take in, but also by deciding what you allow others to bring into your mental space. Because gossip doesn't just waste energy or damage relationships, it reveals far more about the one who spreads it than about the one being talked about. Next, we'll explore the fourth type of person, someone who might appear fragile, even pitiable, but who always makes you feel guilty for saying no. The perpetual victim. Don't miss it. Remember, this you don't need to echo the noise in a room full of gossip. Be the one who chooses silence over slander, clarity over chaos. Because that's not just wisdom, it's self-respect. If you found value in what we've shared so far, leave a comment below with the word yes. Your voice matters, and I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Now we move on to the fourth type of person. Fair weather friend. These are the people who walk beside you only when the skies are clear. They're charming, easy to like. They show up for your wins. They laugh at your stories. They toast your achievements. And they stay close as long as your life is going well. But one day the storm hits, illness, failure, loss, or emotional breakdown, and they go silent. No texts, no calls, no presents. You suddenly realize their loyalty was tied only to your light, not your darkness. The danger with fair weather friends is that they can seem indistinguishable from true friends, at least when everything in your life looks good. They're warm, charismatic, even generous. But when your joy fades, when you're no longer the center of attention, they slowly vanish. And that silence speaks volumes. Their friendship is conditional, measured by how entertaining or convenient your life is for them. When you need more than small talk, when you need someone to really listen, to stand by your side, they withdraw. Not because they're cruel, but because they lack the depth to walk through difficulty with anyone, even the ones they claim to care about. One of the clearest public examples of this dynamic is the story of Robin Williams. At the height of his career, he was beloved across the world, surrounded by people who admired his genius and humor. But as he began battling depression, addiction, and serious illness, his inner circle grew smaller and quieter. The world adored his laughter, but didn't know what to do with his pain, and his story isn't unique. It reflects a very real pattern in our society. We celebrate people when they're winning, but disappear when they need empathy the most. Psychologists tell us that fair weather friends often avoid emotional discomfort. They've never learned to sit beside someone who's hurting. They lack emotional maturity and deep empathy. So instead of leaning in, they pull away. They convince themselves that giving space is kindness, when in reality it's just self-preservation. And that's exactly why in life we must learn to discern who truly stays when the light fades. In the next part, we'll talk about the fifth type of person. Someone who makes you feel guilty every time you set a boundary. They're not loud, but slowly they bend your limits by playing the role of the helpless victim. You guessed it, the perpetual victim. Let's take a closer look. Stoic philosophy reminds us that true strength is built from within. We should never depend too heavily on anyone else to keep our emotions steady. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It is in our power to live a life of virtue regardless of the conditions we find ourselves in." In other words, peace doesn't come from the presence of others. It comes from the solid foundation within yourself, and fair weather friends serve as painful reminders that not every smile is a sign of loyalty. They challenge your ability to discern, teaching you this vital truth: it's not wrong to enjoy their company during joyful moments, but it's dangerous to hand them the keys to your most vulnerable self. That part of you, the honest, wounded, and tender part, should be reserved for those who stay when the lights go out, when the stage is empty, and when you have nothing left to shine with. True friends don't show up with perfect answers. They show up with quiet presence and unwavering care. They don't run from the storm, they sit beside you through it. And in Stoicism, trust is never given because of charm. It is earned through consistency over time. Now prepare yourself, because the fifth type of person is even more subtle: the narcissist. Have you ever met someone who made you feel incredibly special until the moment you needed them to care for you as much as you cared for them? They're the ones who light up every room. Everyone is drawn to them, and yet strangely, the longer you're around them, the more your own light seems to dim. That's often the first sign you've encountered a narcissist. At first, everything feels subtle. They seem confident, eloquent, magnetic. They know exactly how to make you feel seen until they no longer need you, because their attention was never really about you. It was always about how you made them feel. They're not seeking connection, they crave validation, admiration, and control. And the moment your presence no longer serves their needs, the warmth disappears quietly and without warning. What makes narcissists hard to spot is their ability to mimic emotions they don't actually feel. They can fake empathy, pretend to listen, even offer comfort as long as it costs them nothing. But the moment you truly need support, when you're no longer just the audience in their performance, you'll see it clearly. They become cold in ways that hurt. Every conversation shifts back to them. Every success you share triggers their insecurity. Every time you express a need, it becomes a reason for them to make you question your own worth. Psychologically, this isn't just selfishness. It's a form of emotional extraction. Narcissists don't just want attention, they rely on it. To maintain their inflated self-image, they collect people like others collect trophies as proof of their importance, not as relationships they care to protect. And if you stay around them long enough, you won't just feel exhausted. You'll feel drained from the inside out. In the next section, we'll uncover the subtle signs of narcissistic behavior, and more importantly, how a Stoic protects themselves from these emotionally depleting dynamics. Stay tuned. When you stay too long around a narcissist, you begin to feel like you're no longer yourself, but just a reflection, a mirror they use to admire their own inflated ego. And when that feeling creeps in, it's time to take a step back. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes your anchor, holding you steady in the middle of the storm. Epictetus once said, "First know who you will, then adorn yourself accordingly." That teaching reminds us, never let someone else's lack of empathy shake your sense of worth. With a narcissist, no matter how much you give, you'll never earn their love. You cannot be worthy of respect from someone who only sees others as tools to elevate themselves. But you can draw a line. You can choose not to participate in their endless loop of manipulation disguised as charm. You can protect your inner peace by refusing to shrink yourself to fit into the shadow they cast. Detachment in this case is not cruelty, it is clarity. The narcissist rarely changes, but you don't have to be pulled into their emotional orbit, and when you finally walk away not in anger but with self-respect, you reclaim something more valuable than their praise, your inner freedom. Now we move to the sixth type of person, someone who also makes you feel lifted, but for a very different reason, the flatterer. Have you ever met someone who constantly praises you in a way that feels almost hypnotic? Compliments at just the right moment in just the right tone, so sweet, so perfectly timed, that you can't help but feel special at first. It feels like a gift. Finally, someone sees your worth, but over time something begins to feel off. Their compliments, though frequent, lack depth. They feel rehearsed, overly smooth, almost too perfect. And then you notice every time they flatter you, it happens right before they ask for something, or when they need you to take their side in a situation. And that's when it hits you. This isn't appreciation. It's a strategy. You're not receiving genuine admiration, you're dealing with a skilled manipulator using praise as a tool. One striking example of this dynamic took place in early Hollywood. There was a well-known actor who rose to fame not just because of talent, but because of how he skillfully built relationships with powerful directors and producers. He was a master of flattery. He knew exactly who to compliment. He knew exactly when to say it. And he made it sound as natural as breathing. But when some of those same people fell from influence, he vanished from their lives without a second thought. Because for him, compliments were never about connection. They were currency, a means to an end, and it worked for a while, until people began to see through it. His admiration had never been real. It had always been a transaction. That's the psychological profile of a flatterer. They aren't necessarily cruel, but they are calculated. In the next section, we'll go even deeper. How do you tell the difference between genuine praise and manipulative flattery? And how does a stoic keep themselves grounded, unmoved by sweet but empty words? Let's keep walking this path together. The flatterer understands one thing very well. Validation is one of the strongest human needs. We're naturally drawn to those who make us feel seen. But instead of offering praise from a place of sincerity, the flatterer uses compliments as bait. And if you're not careful, you'll begin to crave their approval. So much so that you start adjusting your behavior, your thoughts, even your decisions, just to hold on to their admiration. That's the moment they gain control over you, without you even realizing it. Stoic philosophy is the antidote to this trap. It teaches us your self-worth must not be placed on the shifting winds of external praise, but built on the solid foundation of inner virtue. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment," and that applies to compliments, too. We can receive them with gratitude, but we must not depend on them. Because the more we cling to admiration, the more we lose our clarity. We become easier to manipulate, less able to detect deception, all because our ego has been seduced. But If you remain humble, you will see clearly what's real and what's just a performance. Walking away from false flattery isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And once again, when you step away, not out of anger but out of self-respect, you reclaim something far more valuable than any admiration, your inner freedom. Now, let's move on to the seventh type of person, one who rarely says anything harsh, never causes a scene, but somehow always makes you feel smaller every time you succeed. This is the envious. They don't attack you openly. They smile, but behind that smile is quiet discomfort. Envy rarely shows itself clearly. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It hides behind what sounds like supportive words, but in truth masks the deep insecurity within them. The envious person may look like a friend, even a fan. But every time you take a step forward, they feel as though they're falling one step behind. And because their pride won't allow them to express it, they react with calculated detachment, cold, subtle, and strategic. Envy is one of the most corrosive emotions because it often isn't recognized until the damage is already done. You'll notice half-hearted congratulations, forced smiles, stories quickly redirected toward their own achievements to bring the spotlight back to themselves. It's not what they say, it's how they say it. And more importantly, how you feel afterward. You'll begin to question your own success. You'll ask yourself, should I even share this or stay quiet? The truth is, a mind clouded by envy is constantly waging silent wars. They measure their worth through endless comparison, and in their eyes your success becomes a painful reminder of what they haven't achieved. In the next part, we'll explore how to spot envy even when it's well hidden, and how a Stoic protects their peace without closing their heart. Let's keep going. You grow and move forward, your progress becomes their insecurity. But remember this, it's not your fault, and truthfully, it never was. What you're seeing is not a reflection of you, but of their own dissatisfaction, a sign of the internal battle they're trying to avoid. And unless they confront it, they will continue projecting that bitterness onto anyone who dares to rise. This is where Stoic philosophy gives us an essential perspective. A Stoic does not seek validation or identity from the outside. They anchor themselves in purpose, remaining steady amid the emotional storms of others. Envy in the Stoic view isn't something to be fixed in others. It's a storm one you learn to walk through without being swept away. Marcus Aurelius spoke about the strength that comes from holding your inner fortress unshaken by praise or resentment. So when you encounter envy, there's no need to confront it, and no need to try and fix the person feeling it. What you need is clarity. Understand this, their behavior is not a judgment of your worth, but a reflection of their own unhealed pain. You protect your peace by staying rooted in your core values, and by being intentional about what you share and with whom. Let your success speak quietly, but carry it with the weight of authenticity. And never let someone's silent bitterness convince you that you need to shrink yourself just so they feel more comfortable. Now we move to the eighth type of person, someone who seems fragile, even sympathetic, but who ends up pulling you into an emotional spiral with no way out. The perpetual victim. There's a certain heaviness that surrounds those who always see themselves as victims of life. No matter what happens, they always find a way to place themselves in the role of the harmed victims of others, a fate of the world. They live in a loop of helplessness, repeating the same stories of mistreatment, bad luck, and missed opportunities as if their only role in life is to suffer. At first, your natural instinct might be compassion. After all, we're human, we understand pain. But over time, you begin to feel drained. Every conversation circles back to them, and every offer to help is met with a reason why it won't work. That doesn't apply to me. I've tried that already. Or art. My situation is different. Their identity is so entangled with being the victim that they resist stepping out of it, because to do so would mean facing a difficult truth. They've always had the power to choose a different path. But that truth many people aren't ready to face. Psychologically, this is known as responsibility. Avoidance, avoiding failure, discomfort, or the need to change. Blame is easier. Change is harder. And when you try to help them, when you try to save them, you'll eventually realize something painful. Helping someone who doesn't want to help themselves will only drain you emotionally. So how do you show compassion without falling into the trap of saving someone who won't swim? How does a Stoic stay kind without sacrificing their own boundaries? The answers are waiting in the next section. When you spend too much time around someone who constantly plays the victim, you begin to question your own strength and your own steadiness. Their quiet, persistent despair gradually pulls you into such a dark space that you're no longer sure where you stand. And that's exactly when you need to return to the wisdom of Stoicism. Stoic philosophy reminds us we are not victims of circumstance. We are the authors of how we perceive and respond to life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But those who cling to the victim mindset reject this truth. They place all their power outside themselves, in others, in fate, in everything they claim they can't control. And in doing so, they abandon the very thing Stoics hold most sacred: inner freedom. Epictetus was born into slavery, yet he taught no one could enslave his mind. That is the kind of freedom Stoicism leads us toward, one that doesn't rely on external fairness, but is built from inner clarity. So when you're dealing with someone who always sees themselves as powerless, you don't need to carry them on your journey. You can offer perspective, encouragement, and necessary distance, but never sacrifice your peace to stay in a relationship that pulls you off course. Now we arrive at the 9th type of person: subtle, rigid, and often leaving wounds that are invisible but deep, the judger. Have you ever sat next to someone whose very presence made you feel judged? Their gaze is cold. Their words are laced with implication, as if they're the judge of your life and your standing trial. Judgmental people don't see the world as it is. They see it through the rigid lens of their own standards. They label quickly, they listen slowly, and they act as if their opinion is the final verdict on a person's worth. They're not seeking understanding. They're seeking confirmation of their own superiority. And in doing so, they stifle conversation, hinder growth, and sever the deep human connection we all need. I once witnessed this at a local event where people were invited to share stories of resilience. A woman stood up and bravely spoke about her personal losses and years of financial hardship. Her honesty brought the room to a respectful, emotional stillness, until one man interrupted her not to ask a question, not to show empathy, but to criticize her past decisions, his voice dripping with judgment as if he were delivering a moral verdict from a pedestal. The warmth in the room disappeared instantly. The atmosphere turned cold, and here's what you must remember: a Stoic doesn't live to avoid judgment, nor to please everyone. They live by principle, with inner clarity and the strength not to let someone else's opinion distort their inner compass. In the final section, we'll revisit all 9 types of people who do not deserve your trust and reflect on one essential question: how can we live as Stoics in a world full of shifting loyalties and emotional chaos? Get ready. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to understand. He simply passed judgment. And in that moment, the entire room shifted, from inspiration to silence, from connection to cold distance. Stoic philosophy helps us see this clearly. A Stoic does not promote moral blindness. They believe in distinguishing right from wrong, but they also teach us judgment should come from humility, not from ego. Marcus Aurelius warned us about the temptation to judge others too harshly. He reminded us the mistakes of others are never far from our own. And he wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, remind yourself today, I will meet people who are intrusive, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, jealous, and rude. But none of them can harm me, because someone else's judgment does not define you. It reveals more about them than it does about you." And as we've seen throughout this journey, when you encounter envy, there's no need to confront. When you face manipulation, there's no need to retaliate. When someone plays the victim, there's no need to rescue them at your own expense. All you need is clarity. Clarity about your values, clarity about your boundaries, clarity about what and with whom you choose to share. Let your success speak quietly, but let your heart carry it with unwavering authenticity. And never let someone's silent bitterness convince you to dim the very light you've worked so hard to build. Thank you for walking with me through this deep and honest journey. If you've ever felt tired, disappointed, or quietly broken because of the people you once trusted, remember you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not powerless. Life is too short and your peace is far too precious to be handed over to those who don't deserve it. These 9 types of people, they weren't just lessons about them. They were mirrors showing us what we truly value, what we've tolerated for too long, and where we must finally draw the line. Stoicism reminds us we cannot control others. We can only control how we respond. So respond with clarity, with boundaries, and with compassion, but never at the cost of your own dignity. You have the right to choose relationships that nourish your soul, not just fill your calendar. This isn't about being cold. It's about protecting the warm flame inside you for those truly worthy of sharing it. If this video resonated with you, if it stirred something within you, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Who knows, your story might be exactly what someone out there needs to hear today. And if you're found strength in this journey, please subscribe, tap the bell, and continue walking with me on this path of resilience, wisdom, and self-respect. We'll grow stronger, one decision, one boundary, one realization at a time. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, protect your peace and keep your light burning bright.